Welcome to the talk. This is a stage one review, but anybody who's interested in fashion or design is welcome. I've got this lovely image to start it off, and we can review the project brief as well alongside if you would want to have a look at that to go through if anybody's actually thinking of doing the project brief. Let's just start off with a couple of quotes here. Sorry, if you can't see any of those, but oops, I've lost it again. Sorry about. We do get some hitches sometimes. So a couple of quotes. One from Claude Monet. Not having a good day today, am I? The richness I achieve comes from nature, the source of my inspiration. And Alexander McQueen, there is no better designer than nature. Both very, very true, working in different times and different ages. But there are quite a lot of quotes about nature in the art world, and it is an endless source of inspiration. Structurally, colour, texture, form, everything. So the initial picture was Victor and Rolf. They are Italian designers, are actually Dutch, but they obviously, I looked at this with another student the other day, and they're very much inspired by nature and their creations through form, fabric, structure, whether it's leaves or bark. Everything seems to be contained somehow, like a bit like a seed pod, and very dramatic. This is part of the autumn winter couture collection. I don't know whether anybody knows the difference between couture and runway. Couture is the top end of the market, and we were just having a look. We are recording. We're just having a look at Victor and Rolf's couture collection from autumn winter 2025, just talking about couture and being the top end. It's bespoke, it's one-off pieces. They might have a whole team in a fashion atelier, a workshop basically, that could work on a single piece for a couple of months. So it's the really high-end one-off pieces that don't always go into production. Runway is designer brands. They could be anything from sort of quite expensive to diffusion ranges like Miu Miu or those kinds of things. And then obviously probably more accessible to most of us, we've got the sort of high street, more commercial end of fashion. And then increasingly important, the sort of vintage secondhand market is also part of the retail structure. But this is just from fashion photography. It's just a really strong set of images. So task one from the fashion and textiles project is about processes. It lists investigation into fashion drawing and sketching, fashion illustration, textile manipulation, embroidery, surface pattern and printmaking, and fashion photography. Now, at this stage, I'm expecting you perhaps not to have made any clothes before, or maybe customized some clothes or had a go at them, or maybe you just like sketching fashion. So I haven't really included in this about other really important processes like draping and pattern cutting, because at this stage it's about ideas. It's translating inspiration into something two-dimensional and three-dimensional. Fashion drawing can be a number of different things. It can be what I call a thumbnail sketch, a little thing that I have surrounding me a lot, something that I've seen inspires me. It could be a beautiful dressing a sketch with a shape, or it could be rendered more with texture, or as I said, a thumbnail sketch. And then something that a lot of students don't know about is when we do sort of flat sketches and construction sketches, which actually show how a garment is made. There's two roles in the fashion industry. You quite often get a designer, and you might get a technical designer who basically translates a designer's ideas fit for production and making, either in a workshop or in a factory. And they provide what we call a spec sheet, specifications and measurements, all things that are part of the industry and part of the process. But at this point, I think you don't really need to go down that route, but it is a style of drawing, and it's an important style of drawing. And some people may prefer to work in a flat sketch kind of system than they do working on a figure. And, you know, I think both are acceptable. Illustration is a little bit different. It's historical. It used to be used in fashion houses and ateliers to record looks that could then go into magazines to sort of supplement photography. And it's an art form in itself. You don't have to be a designer to be an illustrator. I worked for John Galliano when I was doing my master's degree, and then I worked there for a few years afterwards in the studio. And he started off as a fashion illustrator. He was not a designer, and then gradually he became a designer because it interested him more. But there's many, many styles of fashion illustration. And I quite like the idea of this very elegant pencil sketch through to the more sort of funky, modernistic kind of attitude. And again, they tend to tell the story of a collection. They tend to give the essence. They may miss out key parts of the body, or as this one shows, key parts of the face, but it gives you an atmosphere and is quite often used to translate and advertise creations or concepts or collections for designers to use. So all of them are applicable. Working drawings tend to be sketch drawings, pencil drawings, a lot digitally now, and then the more sort of elegant final sketches towards the end, which are equally as important. I put one of my favourite artists up, Joanna Goodman, who is an artist and an illustrator who does fashion. And it's just a different way of working, using collage, digital collage or collage. I'm a bit old school. I like getting my hands dirty and using a pair of scissors or tearing paper. And, you know, if you're not digitally minded, these are very accessible if you wanted to collage, you know, using different parts of the body. I found the one on the far right very inspirational. I love the little legs popping out and the play with scale. And it could just be done with a photograph or a bunch of magazines and be done in a very, very playful way, and it shows proportion and shape, and you get as much out of that perhaps even as a sketchbook. So I want to show you different ways of working and being able to realize your ideas. These are just examples. You find your own style, you find your own way of working. These are just guidelines. Embroidery. I've chosen two images. They're both students, actually they're the same student, who use embroidery in quite a loose kind of way to replicate stitches. I mean, they could be quite messy, but they're quite sort of drawing with lines in a fluid way. When we talk about drawing can be used, it's mark making, and I think threads are mark making. So you can draw with embroidery, you can be quite free with it, or more controlled in that case. I've included a slide about draping because this might be something some of you want to try. How you translate a sketch, and you can drape on yourself. You don't need a mannequin. You could drape on a friend or a member of your family. You don't need any specific equipment to do it. and you could use paper. Initially, designers tend to use pattern paper and drape to get a form or a shape to then pin on a body or pin on a mannequin to then translate it into the kind of shape they want to do. And then they use something called calico to create the ribbons. I mean, none of this was the part of the same garment. It was just a way of translating. And I quite like this large drawing next to it. Let me see if I can get that. I can't get that over, but when you see the rebound, looks like they've drawn very large, the kind of ribbon ideas. So when you're thinking about a structure, maybe of a leaf, a crunkled up autumn leaf, which we'll be getting very, very soon, and thinking about the structure or waves or ripples in water, it could be something that you work sculpturally and three-dimensionally. So again, these are all possibilities of ways of working. I'm giving you a sort of step-by-step with the stage one project, but it's open to interpretation and you might work well three-dimensionally. We ask you to look at, I think it's 2, 4, 6, 7 designers who have been inspired by nature and are heavily influenced, or some of their collections, and some of them are past collections, have been inspired by nature. So that would be task 2. So I've picked Alexander McQueen as being somebody who has been inspired by tropical birds, inspired by his muse Isabella Blow, his sort of heritage. He was not a Scottish boy, but his family have Scottish roots. He looked at Highland nature, and you could see from these 2 photographs, which would be really good to build into your research, where you think they got the inspiration. I've just put 2 images down there that could have started off the process. You'll be taking photographs to start off your process. And then this whole underwater siren look with the armadillo shoes, which became an important signature in his prints, using sort of photographic techniques to get his prints for the sort of moths prints and underwater sirens. Another artist, she is an artist, she's not just a designer, Iris van Harpen, another Dutch designer who has used a lot of 3D printing and technical ways of printing to create her designs. Again, she works at a high-end couture level because these ideas are very bespoke and uses a lot of technical references in her work. But I think all are stemmed in inspiration from nature, whether it's sea urchins or ripples in the water or structures, which are really important. And Christian Sireno, who is inspired by one of his first collections by the weather, by storms, by sunsets, by sunrises. And this was actually a photograph a student took, that he felt inspired this collection, you know, looking at skies, looking at storms, to develop ideas. And I've just included 2 more. Ding Young, who uses fabric and structure to literally represent shapes of insects and creatures, and very effectively in the choice and the colour of materials. And Tara Both Mooney, who wants people to connect with the natural world, uses natural fabrics to be able to provide carbon dioxide to the world. So it's looking at things in quite a science and breaking out of the norm and using science to support their creative ideas. There's nothing to say we can't grow fibers from mushrooms, we can't grow trees that we wear, you know, a little bit like 3D printing of Iris van Harpen. We might be growing our clothes soon. Task 3 talks about creative investigation, looking at nature and documenting it around you. So there's a few suggestions. I don't know where anybody lives, but they might be close to woods or forest. Investigate your garden. You could go for a walk on the beach, or you might collect natural objects. And I think all the students' work that I've got to show you, there's elements of this. You know, you might look at the texture of driftwood, shells and cones, study bark, take rubbings, the colours of leaves, produce a colour story about nature, photograph the indentations in soil made by an animal or your own footprints. You know, how does it react? How do soft materials react in nature? Or there'll be a lot of seed pods around at the moment, which make beautiful structures. Record the textures and colours of stones, make rubbings, make line drawings. I think I've cropped it too much. So you could work in a sketchbook. These might be very colourful. I mean, I think summer's a little bit gone now, especially for me. You might record some of your photographs and then think about how you could translate them into fabric. These are things I just got off Pinterest about some people who've been using sketchbooks to explore different structures in nature and overlay ideas, whether it's with wool or crochet. I adore these little almost working on tracing paper or parchment paper, these little sort of notation sketches and building surfaces or cobwebs that might inspire you. Printing using nature as inspiration, so literally painting leaves and printing with them, or laying out different objects and then printing over them, painting over them, so you're getting a silhouette in the background. All make beautiful prints and inspiration. Somebody, I think you could weave with grasses, you could print. I had a very stripy linear check one that somebody did with long grasses and or roll seed pods along just to see how they make textures and patterns. You might do more investigation. These were, again, beautiful leaf prints, but they also looked at the negative, positive, the shape of the leaves, and then tried to make a little bit out of paper that could be translated into fabric. Drew some of the structures that they saw, creating a little print out of a lino cut or a gel print, and looking at different forms. I like the way they've used not black ink, but they've almost used a natural colour to explore their ideas. This is a student's work that was looking at fungus and lichen and fallen trees and took photographs. I think this photograph is amazing. I've never seen anything like that with fungus and lichen like that. And I think she lived near the New Forest and the roots of the trees, and how to interpret that in a really lively way. And very sort of exciting use of mark making, and then starting to interpret what they saw into fabrications and drawing ideas. Somebody who lives near the water, who made studies of what happens with the water, some very quick mark making, using some material to experiment to get the form and the shadows, and again repeating the embroidery marks that were created. And through your drawing, what you're thinking about, and these are sort of beautifully presented, is a structure, a photograph, a drawing, and how you could interpret that drawing. Again, I think this is most successful using a thistle, and again, a beautiful shot of a thistle, lovely delicate tones, and then interpreting into using fabric and using a pattern fabric, which worked really well with the tones of the thistle. And again, the same student looking at a very simple branch and drawing it through, and then discovering how it could be made in fabrics. You know, could that be a neckline? Could it be a piece of jewelry? Could it then be turned into the strap of a shoe or handle of a handbag? I mean, this is where the creativity comes into play, and that you can interpret ideas how you want to do. So this is all part of task 4, fabric manipulations. Just going to take a sip of coffee. Now we come on to the drawing part. You've studied nature, you might have created some prints, you might have created some fabrics, done some drawings. Many designers, and it's not a cheat, use a template. The word we use in the industry is croquis. I'm not very good with the French, and that literally means sketch. You can find lots of templates on the internet. You can create your own. I mean, this is on the left side, a simple interpretation of looking at proportion and form. So using circles and dividing them up. They do tend to be elongated. They do tend to be not human at sometimes, very tall, slim people. But obviously we work in a world where we're not all the same size. So there are templates for other sizes. And if I could move this box, there's even a children's one underneath. So you can find templates for anything, men, women, children, teenagers. You can get moving templates that show front, back and side. I encourage you to use these as much as possible or create your own. What happens is you get a consistent kind of presentation. It gives you a sense of proportion. So you know where the waist is, the shoulders, the knee is, how long. You know, when we talk about a knee-length skirt, literally it hits the knee above, on the knee, or just below. So you can think about that. You can then play with sleeves. You can take one of these and just draw on top of it with the lines underneath. It's fine. And play with proportion. Play with some of the ideas that you've discovered in nature. You know, whether they're circular, whether they have no waist, or they accentuate the waist. And that's absolutely essential to discovery. This is the girl that did the embroidery, the student, and you'll recognize the Cecil. She took the template, and this was done digitally, but again, it could be done with collage. It could be done any way you choose. I'd probably be the collage person because I like cutting bits of fabric out. But how she used the sort of prints, this was based on feathers. She mixed things up. She patched things together. It's quite a simple layering process, but I'm sure it took time that she decided. I mean, the shapes are quite basic, you know, a form-fitting skirt or skinny pants or a sort of tubey kind of dress. But through fabrication and fabric mixing and playing with scale, she's got something that looks quite exciting, quite original, very unique. Could be quite difficult to make, but we're not asking you to make anything at this stage. We're asking you for ideas, interpretation, making your work seem exciting and learning from it. Again, this was another Northern Irish, I think, water interpretation of exploring fabrications. She went through all the drawing stages, and this was the fabric inspiration, and she sort of collaged with some of her fabrics, but thought about the shape. But the collage gave these sort of extreme sleeves or a top, and then she wondered what it would look like worn with a pair of pants or trousers or leggings. So using it all the time. This was by no means, I've got another page on the next page, the only one that she did, but she could experiment quite quickly using a template to discover form. Again, these were some other fabrics that she did, which was based on some kind of sea urchin, I think. I like this one at the bottom with all the sort of twists and turns. You don't even need to be good at sewing for this project. You know, it's about thinking three-dimensionally and almost sculpting your natural objects into fabrics and seeing how you could work with them. And again, she just used them in different scales. I mean, this skirt, I think, was this piece that she used. And then she took this piece and then repeated it round the body. I mean, it looks very sort of Alexander McQueen, and then thought about how she could cascade some of these ideas together. And task 6 is about presenting your work. You know, you could have sketchbook exploration and idea development. You could have a page of fabric manipulations, a final collection lineup, and mood boards, so that you could show how your ideas could be presented in your portfolio. This was the student who did the tree previously. Other work they did about bones as well, but I included the tree so you had something to link it back to. And they explored different options, all hand-drawn, so no digital used if that's not your style, but how beautiful this sort of construction. They had a collection of skeletons that they collected, and they used that as inspiration to make these sort of skeletal kind of details, and also used the tree to experiment with. Very successful, but very clear presentation. A fashion lineup. A fashion lineup comes up if you've ever seen videos or maybe YouTube. Runways, they tend to have what they call a lineup, and they're traditionally always been used with a Polaroid, and they stick the models wearing the outfits in the order of the runway. And what you're creating is a collection. You're creating something that could work together, that tells a story, that pushes your ideas as far as you can. This student used a photograph of a model as their template to draw on, and then cut out hand-drawn pieces and imagined what they could look like on as outfits, and I think they're very successful. And then you can see how the story was built for each outfit using their nature inspiration and connections into their design. Some of them were very experimental, just layering things together to get mixtures of textures. Again, the same was done here, but a beautiful way of presenting ideas. I mean, this was one page and that was another. I've just put them together for this purpose. And we have students who do this more for illustration idea. This student went through all the steps, making fabrics, and decided they wanted more of an accessible collection. And these are just 2 illustrations, but again, using details that they got from nature. You'll recognize some of the leaf drawings from the previous slide that used up there. But obviously I'm not showing you a whole presentation, but it's nice to see how perhaps more conventional clothing could be used with decorative and colour details on there, whether it's just a little print down the side of jeans. I've seen that this year with argyles down the side of jeans, and gives you a real sense of illustrative quality. You must evaluate your work. You must think about which artists and designers inspired your work, what materials were successful and why. What have you learnt that you didn't know when you started? Can you make improvements as you move to your next project? And do you feel proud of your achievements? I think this is quite an exciting project that gives you drawing opportunities, mixed media opportunities, sculptural fabric opportunities, but then thinking about how your ideas transpire into a collection. And again, we expect a bibliography at the end about keeping references of your sources. In the age of AI, we're sort of more and more aware that we have to know where your sources of research come from. We're going to be doing a talk about Harvard referencing, this is an example at the end next week. So if anybody who's doesn't really or finds it difficult, we'll go over that next week.